Okay, let us begin. I know a number of people are gone today, so but I wanted to, yeah, just give us a chance to sort of continue exploring, continue looking at versions, different examples of statements of faith, and have us read through these and just kind of see where we find ourselves after five of these conversations. So, Brad, did you want to say something about your class at the end, or the one you're starting next week? We have copies of the
now. Um,
yeah, the no verses, no chapters, Mark.
yeah, and I think, well, the thing that I would like you to try to do if you read through one is pay attention to the characters and and how those are groups. I mean, they're groups of characters. They're individual people, but they fit generally into groups. And where are the tensions between these characters, especially between whatever characters there are and Jesus, as it moves toward Holy Week? Then what's the whole story setting us up to understand by way of the how these characters interact and the events they have, to understand how that culminates in Holy Week? I mean, the arc of the story. I mean, I just invite you to read it as a short story. Moves toward then the events of Holy Week. If you when you know sort of what the end is and you begin to read, say, that may be moving toward this or that or the other. I think you'll find some things that when you don't have to mess with chapter and verse numbers and all that, or headings that tell you what you should be expecting in the next section. I mean, those are helpful if you're studying. You want to find where is the prodigal son.
There are handouts up here, you all. There are handouts, right?
But when you just take the chance to read it as a story, see what it does.
Yeah. All right. So there are, like I said, everybody who's on this email should have gotten this attachment with the Gospel of Mark, with no chapter or verse included, verse numbers included. If you would like a hard copy, they're right here as well.
Right. Will you at all be addressing how you feel about the reliability of the Gospel of Mark, the historical accuracy of what may have happened to Jesus?
Yeah, yes and no. Let's leave it at that. But we'll also talk about Mark has so-called several endings. If you stop reading at chapters, you don't have the verse you want to know. Well, I think I cut it off at chapter 16, verse 8a, when the women leave the tomb in terror.
Yeah, they were afraid.
There's a little more, but that scholars say that was probably added on later or borrowed somewhere else. So I want you to think of the ending as leaving the tomb in terror and amazement. And how did everything that precedes set you up for that? What kind of ending is that? Historically, he wasn't a very good storyteller, right? No, that's an interesting way to get the story.
What's the story?
It's a pretty darn good story.
So there are hard copies of this. As I said, as I look around the room, most of you, if you want an email and didn't get one earlier in the week, people are sort of regular attenders of this. I sent this out to you all on Thursday, I think. So hard copies, or you can have your name. I can put your name on the list to get an electronic copy of it. So thanks, Brad, for those next 3 weeks in advance. Appreciate your exploring the Holy Week texts.
Your generosity exceeds yours.
My knowledge. All right. So let us dive in. Most of these that I put in here, and there are a variety of styles and formats, come from ecumenical community in Scotland called Iona. And they've been around for 90 years almost or so. And I stuck on the first page of the handout just a couple paragraphs about sort of how they understand themselves and how they understand what it means to worship. Just to give you a context for these aren't just coming out of a fringe group. This is a remarkable group. They produce incredible liturgical. A lot of the liturgies I use in communion come out of this community. They are really committed to justice, to inclusion, to updating images and yeah, while still keeping themselves.
Oops, that's me. Sorry.
So yeah, so let us just practice. Just let's read these through one at a time and see what our experience of them is, just like we have done, like we did the last time with a couple different creeds or affirmations. So let's start with the affirmation at the bottom of the page. And then again, these are created by this ecumenical community. So this community that's made up of most of the mainline Protestant communities. So let's start with this. We believe in God above us. Okay. We believe in God above us, maker and sustainer of all life, of sun and moon, of water and earth, of all human persons. We believe in God beside us, Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh, born of a woman, servant of the poor, tortured and nailed to a tree, a man of sorrows, he died forsaken. He descended into the earth to the place of death. On the third day, he rose from the tomb. He ascended into heaven to be everywhere present, and his kingdom will come on earth. We believe in God within us, the Holy Spirit of Pentecostal fire, life-giving breath of the church, spirit of healing and forgiveness, source of resurrection and of eternal life. Amen. Just any responses to this?
I love this one. As soon as they got to the second line, above us and then beside us and then within us, to me, that captures a lot of the meaning of the creed for me. I didn't pick over a lot of the other words so much. I know it goes into some things that some people may or may not want to be able to say. But I love that concept, above us, beside us, and within us. That really.
What is it
felt
about
right
that, Sarah,
to me.
that
That feels so right to me. I can relate to that. It represents God in multiple dimensions and multiple depths and different ways of being able to relate. It just made my heart sing. It just resonated for me personally.
It's the Trinity.
Yeah.
It's a way of
Yeah.
understanding the Trinity. That's not
Absolutely.
understand.
Yeah.
Way of,
expressing
which is something that I fight against daily, but this didn't fight. This didn't.
what was different about this one, Julie, for you?
I just think this feels more one. Doesn't feel like, naming three persons in the Trinity. It names three ways that God is.
Yeah, I liked it and didn't like the things I don't like about it. I find I'm resisting in a lot of these versions. That I think for a creed that makes sense today, just saying the word God isn't going to cut it anymore. Everybody brings preconceptions to that word, and
Interesting.
what but also the language of believing in it still for me resonates with these are the things you have to believe. I'd rather use some kind of trust or faith language. I mean, because belief religiously isn't just a cognitive thing, it's a heartfelt, trusting sort of thing. And the language of God above us, I can read that two ways, that the God sort of transcendent and beyond us, yes, but to the extent that it conveys a kind of three-storied universe, and ancient worldview that doesn't do much for me anymore. And I agree with you. I sort of had to work hard to find the Trinity in there, but I think I could. I mean, each one of the paragraphs that starts with "we believe in" is a statement, and the longest one is about Jesus, or the second person of the Trinity, where that's true in the other creeds usually too, which is sort of interesting. There's and well,
Okay. Others.
Dave,
Yes.
I was just thinking. We're in church when we do these things, so why do we need to affirm our faith at all? We're there. Just think about how does it fit into the flow of worship and the presence of the people in the community there. Do we need an affirmation why we're there? We're not so firm about why we're there without it.
So in some ways, our presence there is an affirmation of something.
Yeah, like
right.
you say you're welcome, whether you're a believer, a doubter, or whatever, you're welcome here.
I have the same sort of response. I now unfortunately read everything with what is the non-believer thinking at this point? What is the doubter thinking? I mean, is the doubter wondering what in the world we mean by Pentecostal fire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unfortunately now I have that problem. I'm trying with the same spot. Who are we saying this for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to think that I resonate with that, and it's also a way of saying in this community we have certain understandings that would distinguish from other communities. I mean, some people these days, under the name of Christianity, make outrageous, I think, simply malicious claims about who God is, and so it's important to say these are the things that we affirm. And also, I mean, I come with the notion that there are no atheists. I mean, everybody worships something, whether you realize what you're doing is worshiping or not. So part of what we're saying, we're here to say no to the things that tempt us to worship that aren't worthy of our worship, and as best we can, yes, to God as we understand God, who is the one who gives us everything. Can't put that into a creed very well, but anyway.
So should we be Quakers? Or should we completely rely on ritual?
Well, that's a kind of a either or. There's a both and somewhere.
I think once we started on
I'll
the,
just say even Quakers, by the way that they conduct themselves, are affirming the kind of God that they believe in, trust, and so forth. I mean,
But isn't that true? But can't that be true about us too, about who we are? That we affirm that by how we live and how I don't know that it's as much what we say in this part of the service that's going to impact people. And
for me, a lot of this goes back to that first discussion about this was the Apostles' Creed was a creed for baptism. So when you're saying I want to consciously bring somebody into this fold, here's what that's all about, and that makes a lot of sense. Maybe I mean I'm persuaded maybe on a weekly basis that's not not the big, but if we're baptizing, then we say, okay, this is what you're really committing your life to.
Yeah.
And maybe then in that sense, I think it's not bad to be reminded of that. Maybe not in the same words every week in the same way, but
I think without a statement, it's hard to understand what the congregation does really believe in. My experience going to a Quaker meeting, I kept waiting for something, what's gonna happen here? And, I mean, it told me really nothing except they're quiet. So I didn't understand what they believed in at all. I mean, somebody pontificated at the lectern and it's so quiet, it drove me nuts.
So you think having
I
something,
think we need something to
Mhm.
say, however it's couched, because we spoke earlier about what do people who are coming here that are not Lutherans
Mhm.
know about us, unless we
Mhm.
give them a book. This is what Lutherans believe, and we do
Mhm.
have a pamphlet of that.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I think we're just a run-of-the-mill sort of liberal congregation. And I don't know if they really know why we are what we are.
Doing behind you is the mission, vision, and values of the congregation. This is from a council meeting. Do we just recite those?
no.
Put those in the bulletin.
Or put them in?
They are.
I think they are.
They are in the bulletin on the front, yeah. And that balance of this is what I believe, this is what or who I trust, this is how I live. And the connection, the whether the how connected do those feel? We can say I believe this, but does that define? Yeah, how much does a statement define who we are? If it's couched in belief. I've always wondered because I mean, every church I've ever been in, it's like believers, seekers, and doubters. And do the doubters and seekers feel welcome if we have a statement that says this is what we believe? I think that is a question that helped produce these conversations and with the number of people who have been part of this community for a long, long time and don't believe in the specific things, a lot of the specific things that are in the Apostles' Creed, what do we do with that tension?
So
And
counterpoint on that.
Yeah.
It would be if one of the, just as a for instance, if one of the things you're coming and you're doubting is, well, the virgin birth thing, come on, I can't. Then hearing some kind of affirmation of faith that doesn't use that phrasing or is clear that that's not the thing we're hanging our whole belief system on may really help someone in their doubt. And probably all the things that were mentioned in the previous conversations that just don't seem to resonate, or ancient language that don't resonate anymore. I can see how some sort of statement might help the doubter, or at least say, okay, well, I'm good. I'm okay if I'm doubting about that because that's obviously not something that's front and center here.
Maybe we should have a list of the things we don't believe.
That's be an interesting creed.
An interest.
I don't believe it. Can you imagine?
Not believe.
Some of us do, some of.
Yes, yeah. Right, right.
Who wrote the Apostles' Creed? Did I miss that?
Not the apostles.
Yeah.
Not the Apostles, right?
It's a 4th century.
Fourth.
But it started early with there was a Roman, like that when Don Lucky was had a document from the 2nd century.
Wow.
Early church people.
Yeah.
Began to pull together key things.
Who sat around the table just like that.
There were
Council meeting.
Yeah.
But the point was they needed to do it because various understandings and interpretations of who Jesus was and so forth were cropping up, and they felt a need to say, no, you can't. If you travel that path too far,
Right.
It's not going to be very redemptive or sustaining or consistent. So they tried to say this and beyond that. No, I mean, it's just it's like you put a kind of fence around things to say, we can't say everything about what's inside, but we can say the stuff that's beyond that, that's more like a different kind of religion than what we're now understanding the Christianity that grew out of Judaism to be.
So it really reflects some of the arguments within the first several centuries of Christianity about who Jesus was or wasn't,
Okay.
and other things, but really a lot about Jesus, because the early heresies, the things to be named as
So the,
heresies.
the creed was a aid to help define. Okay.
Yeah. To find what we were like, simply we being baptized. Who is the faith we are being baptized into,
Mhm.
the community that we are joining.
And how is today different, except that it's a few centuries later?
Yeah.
I
That's kind of
hear
my
so
point.
much down at the State House about what Christians need.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I do not, the ones I don't go along with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
Fine, we are in this milieu of all of this bullshit.
I agree. I mean, I think that the dangers to the faith are not so much from the folks who don't care one way or the other. It's the folks who are claiming the name, but for reasons that I find hard to, put under the banner of something Jesus would do.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the early church situation. They had other folks cropping up with their own interpretations, and this was about getting some kind of special knowledge. No, they said that's not it. Or not having a place to understand Jesus truly being a divine presence. They gotta, how do you fit that all together? They struggled with that sort of thing.
Hmm.
When you said outrageous, malicious claims, I thought about today's Christians.
Yeah.
Nothing
Well,
much has changed.
Quote, yeah. Not all who say Lord, Lord are going to be part of the kingdom.
Well, there are a number of writers out there that are saying that if the church doesn't become more progressive and change perhaps some of their language, the church is dying. There are many people, who are theologians, PhD kinds of people that are saying this.
Careful. I don't think, I think God's promise is that there is a church eternal. And that I'm not worried about the church dying. I am worried about the church falling under a heading of Christianity that isn't Christianity and being misunderstood. I think there will always be a faithful remnant, although it may become smaller and smaller. But it's not, I don't think it's my job as a Christian or a PhD theologian to, save the church.
I've been starting reading text of Mark.
Oh.
And making notes as we go along. And one of the things
Brad.
myself is what is Mark's view, and I give it some high priority because scholars estimate that Mark was the earliest written gospel that survived, with maybe the exception of Q, which was written. And as I read through that, I'm trying to figure out what is Jesus telling his disciples to believe. And there's not much in there about him telling them to believe this or that. But it's said to make a proclamation and to do certain things. And that's kind of views the organization of the community of followers of Jesus around a different format entirely than something intellectually assented to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's,
Intellectually assented to is the invasion of the Greeks.
that make for great freedom language. We intellectually assent to
Damn,
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
jeez.
Our PhDs intellectually essential.
Take a hard enough time. But back to the mission thing, I mean, I think what you're saying, Bill, is that there's a lot in Mark, I think, that really speaks to kind of mission. I mean, disciples are sent out, and what's this community supposed to be doing, and so forth. And none of the creedal statements really talk about the mission that we're called, or well, mission means sending, what we're sent. Jesus is sent, that's part of God's sent, missio in Latin, and we're sent, and that I think that's language that resonates with people today because every corporation now has a mission statement.
Yeah.
Most of them are better than what congregations come up with, in my opinion, but they probably have highly paid consultants who have to put that all together.
In Mark, almost nobody, except some who are healed, even understand the message.
Right.
The Pharisees and the scribes don't,
And so-
the disciples don't.
Right.
Jesus even tells people to keep quiet about, but some can't. So there's a deliberate, maybe it's the writer of Mark just trying to explain why at his time, whenever he was writing this, why hadn't all this come out at the time Jesus was alive? So he just offered an explanation. It wasn't about that. It was about what Jesus did and proclaimed.
Now, Bill, don't go further on Mark because I haven't read it yet. I don't want to spoil it alert.
Well, that's my next question.
So
About Mark is an immediate thing.
immediately, Mark loves immediately, yes. So let's keep these questions in mind as we just kind of look through these. This middle one is really hardly more of an affirmation than a celebration, and it's the style is a little different, so that's why I put it in. So who wants to be leader?
You go for it.
Go for it. Okay. In the midst of hunger and war,
We celebrate the promise of liberty.
in the midst of oppression and tyranny,
We celebrate the promise and freedom.
in the midst of doubt and despair,
We celebrate the promise of faith and hope.
in the midst of fear and betrayal,
We celebrate.
in the midst of hatred and death,
We celebrate the promise, love, and life.
in the midst of sin and decay,
We celebrate the promise of salvation and victory.
in the midst of death on every side.
We celebrate the promise of Christ. And then
Responses to this very different kind of thing than we've looked at before.
Oh, it sure deals with the world we live in.
Mhm.
So I just wrote an article about Gaza and the first line, the first leader and response thing just felt like celebrate was the wrong thing. It
I had that same inclination. I thought I would go better. Yeah. Well, if instead of in the midst of it, it would read, we lament hunger and war. And so we lament on the one hand and we celebrate on the other. Because the action here is the celebration, and the other is just kind of descriptive. Not a bad description, I don't think, but that's the same thing struck me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we look forward to,
Even proclaim.
we hold up.
It's almost commit ourselves. I mean, because I think do we just expect God to do all this, right?
Yeah.
Or do we?
well, and in the first, again, I'll focus on the first one. I'm also pretty sensitive to churches that believe that God, you know, if you're good, God provides plenty
Hmm.
for you. It just that first one just
Yeah,
put all kinds of red flags.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Walt Bowman used to say that the former member here, faculty at Trinity, you say the Christian message is essentially about the Christian message is one of joy-filled pain and pain-filled joy. And I think that's that's I think what this is trying to say, but I would word it differently to get the balance, but that all the joy we have is always tempered by the pain that still exists, and even the joy of the resurrection is always in contrast with the suffering and death of Jesus and so forth. And but every pain we have is filled with a joy of a hope in the God that, you know, takes care of us and sustains us and sees us along the way. And
I like the second last one, promise of salvation and renewal, because that brings up some themes in the gospel I won't mention again. About repentance actually was a frequent mention in the gospel. Which has changed. So, you know, this could be a very celebratory kind of affirmation, but it could just stop with celebration, not with action, except for things like intimation and phrases like that.
When I first thought of another word for celebrate, I wondered if we worked towards, you know, if there was something that could be an action. But you know, but I don't know if it works.
Maybe that, you know, we value.
Empty cross.
Oh.
And then have Christ crucified. So.
Heidi's comments a thing.
Heidi, yes, Heidi, welcome. Good to see you. Heidi, do you hear us? We see your hand up.
She's still muted. Yeah, she's muted.
I hear you, but
No,
the hand raise was unintentional. I'm sorry.
no. Okay, good to hear your voice. Anything else on that middle one? What do you think in terms of a back and forth as opposed to a voice going all the way through, just as a concept? Or as a format as opposed to a unison all the way through.
You should pay attention better, you know where you are. How? You just get in on.
Get into a rhythm, yeah.
Right, it could be done outside of the congregation.
Uh-huh.
it's hard to memorize though, if you're
Yeah.
committed to that sort of thing. Yeah, class.
So are we going to ignore the fact that 5 minutes from here on Hamilton Road, there's a depot where arms are stored? Are we going to ignore that? Because what's bothering me about this affirmation of faith is we celebrate the promise of plenty and peace. And we are 5 minutes from a place that stores arms. And not guns, arms that destroy huge bunches of houses in Gaza. Arms here, stored 5 minutes from here. So what's bothering me about this affirmation of faith is it sounds like rainbows puppy dogs to me. Not that I completely believe in the power of prayer, but maybe I'm just feeling that there isn't much practicality here.
there can be more effective ways to name the tensions, the realities of the tensions that we live in, other than
I don't know. I don't know
midst
what I'm
of
feeling.
celebrate.
I don't know what action I want.
Mhm. But I guess what a couple people said, it doesn't sound like this leads to action. It's sort of like it's a state of saying, okay, yeah, we know this brokenness in the world is here, and yet we affirm, yeah, we affirm that
Thank
doesn't
you.
have there. Whether we're saying we affirm that it doesn't have the last word, but or that we can't surrender, we can't simply say that's all there is. But yeah, this language um doesn't honor the gravity or the pain, it sounds like, of the language that you were just quoting from Walt Bowman, Brad, that that our joy always realizes the existence, the reality of the pain as well. And the pain realizes the reality of the joy.
How about the idea that we commit to?
The promise.
About
Mhm.
promises of attributes, I don't know, I'm just thinking. That is an action that I feel like isn't there.
Mhm. It could be that some, like you could celebrate salvation and renewal since we don't work for salvation, probably. But you could have different, if you wanted to do something like this, you could do a variety of verbs. Commit to, work for. Okay.
Dave,
Yes.
the call and response format got me to thinking about African American worship, which uses call and response much more, and which I'm not tuned into emotionally or academically very much. But it does make me think that maybe that has something to do with the involvement of African American Christians in surviving, working through, and resisting the kinds of suffering and oppression that they have felt. I don't know if anybody's got any insight on call and response in African American worship or not. If that's its purpose either.
Hmm. In the interest of time, let's do the next three all at once. Because I think they're similar. You know, this was written by people in the British Isles. And this first one we're going to look at because it has "In God We Trust," so that's not on there's not on their currency. So yeah, let's just do these three and see if they take you anywhere. Okay, we believe in God, whose love is the source of all life and the desire of our lives, whose love was given a human face in Jesus of Nazareth, whose love was crucified by the evil that waits to enslave us all, and whose love, defeating even death, is the glorious promise of freedom. Therefore, though we are sometimes fearful and full of doubt, in God we trust. And in the name of Jesus Christ, we commit ourselves in the service of others to seek justice and live in peace, to care for the earth and to share the community of God's goodness, to live in the freedom of forgiveness and the power of the Spirit of love, and in the company of the faithful, so to be the church for the glory of God. Amen. Should we just take a second? Maybe doing all three might be. Should we just do all three at once and then see what you think? Or do you want to take? Okay, let's do the next one. We believe, let's firm our faith. We believe in Jesus Christ, Son of the one God, maker and sustainer of earth, sea, and sky, born of Mary's womb, faithful to the God of Abraham and Sarah. Jesus healed the sick, served the poor, and on earth. Condemned by the religious, crucified by the state, he died, but transformed even death and rose to life everlasting. He blessed the disciples with his Holy Spirit and sent them forth east and west, north and south. We commit ourselves to Jesus, to one another as siblings, and to his mission in the world in the grace of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Then let us affirm our faith. We believe that God is present in the darkness before dawn, in the waiting and uncertainty where fear and courage join hands, conflict and caring link arms, and the sun rises over barbed wire. We believe in a with us God who sits, who sits in our midst, I think, to share our humanity. We affirm a faith that takes us beyond the safe place, into action, into vulnerability, into the streets. We commit ourselves to work for change and put ourselves on the line, to bear responsibility, take risks, live powerlessly, and face humiliation, to stand with those on the edge, to choose life, and to be used by the Spirit for God's new community of hope. Amen. So, yeah.
I don't have any trouble with the first and third ones. And I don't know if I would on second, but the first and the third ones are good to me.
Anything in particular, Julie, about what?
So the third one really speaks about, what we believe in doing. I like that. And I don't know. They both.
Okay.
Don't like.
I like the middle one.
Anything in particular, Donna?
It says more what I believe I particularly like. That it says what he did, that he healed the sick and served the poor and proclaimed heaven on earth. Condemned by religious and crucified by the state, he died. That does not say he died our sins, and I much prefer this kind of statement. It states what Jesus, his purpose for being on earth, more than some of the other ones did, in very plain language.
Others?
The first one I like, that we explicitly here to care for the earth. So I felt that was sort of the thing we started talking about. The sun and moon, water and earth, and I felt like, okay, and then we skip to humans. I felt like we were going through a story and forgetting, but not that we wouldn't care. The actual plants and things like that. It feels like everything's more included.
I thought the first one was kind of a nice summation.
The third one has images that if you're brave enough to watch the news. You see the joining hands, linking arms, barbed wire, and this to stand with those on the edge, brought those pictures of all these funerals with people. Oh, it just seemed the images were more powerful.
It sort of struck me that way too. It almost could have been written for Northern Ireland at the time. One dilemma that I kind of feel we face in any affirmation of saying the truth, we're the product of a long period of history of creed. So we, and people value that. So that there's some way that has to be incorporated, so we're not cutting ourselves loose from all of our church history and Luther and the early fathers. But on the other hand, we need to live in our age and deal with things like climate change and species extinction. So we need a blend of honoring our roots and dealing with the present at the same time.
I wonder if that's a piece of what some have said in this group in our previous conversations is a sort of a rotation. To perhaps do a rotation of affirmations if we decide to keep doing some sort of affirmation or creed that will include the Apostles' Creed. And that will also honor what isn't in that at all.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of action in the second and third ones too about committing yourself and loving.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love the phrase, we believe that God is present. Just because we do, and also there's just so much brokenness, but that's a powerful statement to make. We still believe God's present, and then what are we going to do?
I was struck by the first one. In Jesus of Nazareth, whose love was crucified by the evil that waits to enslave us all. Because I'm always worried that we are not prepared to face evil. And so finally an acknowledgement that evil waits to enslave us all. And it is God's love that it is our defense. So I'm finally glad that some creed acknowledge that we will face evil every day. And we can use and be wrapped in God's love as a defense. And that's a good thing.
Dave, I was curious about that one. What was the original for community?
It was Commonwealth.
Oh.
And I just, yeah, I think that feels like a word that is terribly known, and that was a very quick word to throw in.
Unless you live in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, exactly. Be inclusive, yeah. To share the inclusivity of God's goodness is something that Kathleen.
To what Bill said about maintaining some kind of connection to our history.
Mhm.
I mean, all of these basically try to talk about the triune God, the three persons. I mean, that's a basic structure.
Right.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But none of them really say something about God being triune. And I'm always looking for a way to help people understand that that means by nature, God is relationship. God is relational, and God is constantly in relationship as the three persons of the Trinity. I think that's an ancient concept, but makes a lot of sense for people today, that we're trusting in a God who is in fact relationship, that creates relationship and invites us into a community of relationship. That's for me, is the anchor point. I thought in the second one, it's confusing to me to say son of the one God, and then a few lines later say faithful to the God of Abraham and Sarah. Well, that the God of Abraham and Sarah by implication means, oh, there were other gods they could have chosen to follow. And I think that's what's really true. There's not just one candidate for God. There's all kinds of candidates. We're trying to define the one that we trust and worship.
Well, it is 18 after. So Yeah, I think we will, we'll get, Michelle, let's get a worship team meeting together just to talk about what we've experienced so far, what we've heard from folks. If there are things that, and yeah, this isn't gonna be making any sort of final decisions all, but, you know, if it's worth getting us together again, we basically have the first Sunday of April, we do not have an adult ed class. That's an open Sunday. The following Sunday, there's an outside speaker coming in. So if this is helpful, we can try to do what I sort of hope to do today, which is sort of pull some things together and just kind of see where people are. If it's helpful to look at, you know, I don't know, we're looking at a lot of things and it's not like we're gonna find one that magically loves. But
But you certainly brought some in that if we decide to go with, you know, on different Sundays, different things, you know.
some. So let's tentatively plan, not tentative, let's let the first Sunday, the Sunday after Easter, the first Sunday of April. Let us gather one more time and we'll look at a few more things here and just sort of see what wisdom you would like to pass on to the worship team around these things. So next week, Brad, thank you.